It is 5 after the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sunny Wissmer. I work with Brightworks Sustainability, and I'm here today to support SEAM orientation alongside the SEAM founder, Rainey Shane. Rainey, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself, and we can go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm Rainey Shane, and I am the CEO of SEAM, which is a nonprofit that I started while I was at JLL. I was formerly the project and development manager at JLL, and I founded the Adaptive Reuse Division at JLL about 7 or 8 years ago. And then about 2.5 years ago, created this social sustainability practice throughout North America for JLL while I was developing this nonprofit. And in April, I left JLL to work for SEAM full time because now SEAM has gotten to a point where it needed me, my full attention. And I felt like JLL would probably survive without me, but SEAM would not. So I am full time now and anxious to let you all know what we are doing.
Exciting. Yeah, we're very excited to have you here today to orient you to SEAM and the certification program. Tagline, of course, being make real estate a force for good. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that is and what that means. Specifically, there's an issue that I'm sure if you're on this call, you're aware of, which is that our real estate projects have limited outcomes, considering the existing and potential social impacts that the projects have. I'm sure we can all think of a time where we worked on a project or know of a project in our own community where there was an impact to the community that wasn't what was intended. And so this is a certification that thinks about those impacts as well as the impacts of stakeholders that might not be in those communities, but are nonetheless impacted by those projects. We also have a lot of really wonderful companies that are looking at ways to improve their corporate social responsibility and S and ESG activities. And so they want a way to measure and understand what good next steps are and how to continue to improve that and be a good steward of their community and stakeholders, both near and far. A lot of these companies have real estate assets or purchase or invest in assets. And so that becomes an increasingly important opportunity for them to grow their positive impact as companies. And finally, and we'll get into this a little later, the existing frameworks we have don't encompass all the stakeholders in real estate projects. Specifically, some of these folks. Yeah, Rainey.
Yeah, these are some pictures of the last rescue that I did in Nepal. I'm a rescue operator for some organizations that directly rescue children out of sex trafficking and forced labor situations. And when we make decisions here about the materials that we're sourcing for our projects, they have far-reaching effects. And we sometimes forget about that connection because the supply chain can be very long. But we want to make sure that as we are creating a real estate project, not only are we looking at the possible impacts for the community around the project, the building occupants, but really taking a holistic and comprehensive look at who are the impacted parties from the activities of our real estate project and what are the riskiest materials that we could source and how can we start to look at more responsible and ethical sourcing so that we're preventing these types of effects. And I do have a nonprofit that rescues children, and I would like for SEAM to put my other nonprofit out of business. That would be amazing.
Goal. I'm here for it. Reasons to act now. There are many. There are many of the people and young people that are stuck, as Rainey alluded to, in situations that they don't want to be in. But there's also some really important statistics to think about in creating the business case and in presenting the ROI for the certification. And so a couple at a glance are really thinking about the companies that say they have a social value strategy in place, but ones that are actually doing something. Those numbers are considerably smaller.
And I do want to jump in and say, we all know there is a return on sustainability and return on social sustainability, but it's really hard to quantify. And there's tons and tons of research about the intangible benefits of social sustainability in addition to sustainability. The SEAM website has a really cool tool that we created called Return on Social Sustainability Investment Calculator. And it allows a company to go through and put in some of the metrics from their business, how many customers they have, and those types of things, and be able to understand what is the return that they're getting on their investment, which is a cool tool that's free. Anyone can go and use it on the website.
So to that point, SEAM certification addresses all of these impacts and more. It's the first social equity certification for real estate and beyond, and it's third-party verified. That's an important part of the standard that I think helps us be accountable to making sure that we're actually achieving the goals that we set out to achieve.
And Sunny, for some reason, my screen is not showing the full slide.
Oh,
I don't know if it's because I've got the Zoom menu that pops up,
let
but
me let me back out and go back in here.
it doesn't allow me to see the page numbers.
How's this? Is this better?
Yeah, I can see the full slide. I can't see the page numbers, so you may just have to tell me where
No
you
worries.
want me to talk.
I can prompt you. That's
Okay.
fine. But I would say, Rainey, anything you have to add is great as well. Exceeding expectations, as Rainey was alluding to, has benefits. There's a number of different studies that we like to reference in addition to the calculator available on the website, specifically looking at brand loyalty, differentiation. 60%, 6% of consumers willing to pay more for products and services from companies that are actually doing something to address this is really significant. Employee loyalty and profitability. So there's a lot to unpack here. I think that it's pretty clear that this is something that will provide additional value. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. Rainey, you want to share a bit about how SEAM works?
Yeah. So when we set out to create this, we realized, coming from the development and representing occupiers and developers, we knew there is a very real issue of certification fatigue. And we almost didn't do a certification, but we knew that social is really hard anyway. So we wanted to try to create a framework that was at least familiar to people that have gone through LEED and WELL and Fitwell and some of the other certifications. We based all of the requirements on internationals. That's what we did. But we created a scorecard like LEED and WELL. There is a SEAM accredited professional that will guide clients through the process if they are doing silver, gold, and platinum. There is a bronze level, which we hope to make accessible to people that don't actually need or have the capacity to hire a SEAM accredited professional. And then we created a certification process that, again, is third-party verified, like LEED. We actually use the same third-party verifier as those certifications. And where we could stick to the familiar processes of LEED and WELL, we did. And we only deviated from that where it made more sense because of the social science nature of our certification.
Yeah, so a lot of this will start to look very familiar for those of you who work in building certifications. Specifically, there are a couple popular resources that SEAM plays very well with, and those are the JUST label from the International Living Future Institute and the toolkit from the Design for Freedom Foundation. So these are tools that you may be more familiar with that you can also use to help achieve the SEAM certification. There's also efforts underway with other certifications to create crosswalks and highlight opportunities of overlap.
Yeah. And again, we wanted to try to make this as easy for people that would want to pursue a certification as possible. And so where we can align with other efforts and other certifications so that we're talking the same language, we're measuring the same indicators, where we can align there to make it easier for those seeking more than one certification, that's what we try to do. And so Design for Freedom Toolkit is a great tool if you're looking at your supply chain. So when we created our activities regarding the supply chain, we pointed to a lot of those tools and said, look, if you're doing this process, we have pre-approved this, and we will accept that as proof that you've completed the activities in the right way for SEAM certification. We have verbal agreement from ILFI to do an alignment with Just 3.0. Again, aligning those. We're doing crosswalks now with LEED. We've done an alignment document with IWBI on the well equity rating. We've got a verbal from Active Score that we'll do a reciprocal crosswalk there. So wherever we can align and make it an easier process, a more streamlined process for certification pursuers, that's our goal.
There's any others that you all are finding useful toward this work, let us know. It's exciting the amount of opportunity to collaborate in this space. But SEAM is also significantly different than some of these other certification and some important ways. And Rainey, I'll let you take it away and share a little bit about this incredible certification.
Yeah. So because we are a social certification, and again, based on social science, which tends to look more at qualitative information versus quantitative on the physical science side of the house, we really wanted to make sure that everything you're doing, the efforts that you're putting in, are leading to the kind of impact and the outcomes that we really want. We don't want to do box checking exercises. We've got enough of those. How do we really create impact? And we based the design of every activity in SEAM on a logic model. And this is a logic model. It's one of the greatest things I've ever run across. It allows you to look at the impact you want to end up with, and then you can reverse engineer all the way back to your inputs. You can start anywhere on this logic model and kind of work in either direction. But the reason this is important is because when you're dealing with social, you don't want to, as my grandmother would say, throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. There are irreversible damages that you can do to people when you're trying to figure this out. So if we look on the front end at how do we create causative activities that lead us to the outcomes that we want, then we're going to hopefully prevent or mitigate any negative harm to people while we're figuring this out. The social science side of the built environment is less developed than obviously the environmental side. So we don't have a lot of formalized research that says if you do this activity and you get this output, it will definitely create this impact for people. We don't have that. And so SEAM is trying to set everyone up for success. And then we will track this information as we go forward. And hopefully we'll get that body of research that we can start to look at causative links between activities and impact once we've gotten 2-3 years worth of projects under our belt. But that's how not only each activity is built on a logic model, but also, and by activity, it would be the word activity is used in SEAM instead of credit. So it's the same thing as a credit if you're thinking about like LEED or WELL. We call it activity because, again, it's part of this logic model. And then there are some activities that require social initiatives to be designed for the project. And again, we run the user through how to design that based on a logic model. That's what this slide is all about.
Awesome. Thanks, Rainey. We have a really great question from Beth in the chat. Curious if the SEAM certification is targeting specific projects and buildings or entire portfolios?
That's a great question. So SEAM is only for projects. It's not for businesses or organizations, but it lends itself really well to portfolios because about 85% of a SEAM certification is process oriented. It's about how we're doing what we're doing, not what does the building look like and perform once we're done. So once you do a SEAM certification the first time, you're going to have all kinds of policies, processes in place that you won't have to do on the next one. So this is really great for portfolios. because there's a large body of information that you can take to the next one. And now you're doing probably 10 to 20% specifically for the new building or the new project. And so we will eventually have portfolio pricing. We haven't had a pilot project that has done or wanted to do a portfolio, but that is in the works.
Yeah, I think that's very exciting. And Beth, if you or others have an idea of a client who might be curious about that, would be very interesting to explore. To that point, there are really three specific ways that SEAM is different. One is in the international standards it considers and includes and complies with, listed below. And then there's a couple other pieces, specifically how comprehensive and holistic it is in considering stakeholders, as we've gone over. And then finally, the measurement of impact, the way that SEAM looks at the impacts through activities is critically different than other certifications. I'm going to share a little bit more about that now.
Yeah, this again is really the difference, not necessarily with the way they design their certifications, but it's the difference between physical science and social science. And physical science is measuring things, and social science measures people, which is more difficult. So when you start to try to look at equity from a physical science filter, it gets pretty prescriptive. And so you start to prescribe who we're trying to address with the certification. SEAM is very different. We have a very comprehensive approach, and we do some work on the front end to make sure that we understand who are all of the stakeholders that are affected. The other way is that because social initiatives are incredibly difficult, even community engagement, the way you do community engagement correctly is quite difficult. So we broke those processes down into steps. And then for each step, we gave guidance and requirements for that step to make sure that as you're doing your work, you're doing it correctly. So it's got this roadmap design for what are the step-by-step ways we do an impact assessment, for example. We only focus on projects. We don't certify organizations. So one of the things we learned when we did the well equity rating alignment with the SEAM certification is that a lot of their credits were focused on the organization as a whole. And when we did our pilot projects, we learned very quickly that some of the policies and processes that we were wanting to put into place, the project team didn't have the ability to put those in place for the organization. We did some pilot projects and we realized very early on that project team did not have the ability to change policies on certain things. So they were project-wide policies. We align our certification level to impact goals, social impact goals, versus aligning to how many points you can get. We also designed it so that we do not offset human harm, because you cannot offset human harm. People are not carbon credits. As we design the requirements for each activity, they are progressive, and you have to move through mitigating or preventing negative impact before you can get additional points for having done or created things that create positive impact. The other thing is we look at measuring qualitative versus looking specifically to quantitative. And then we also focus more on leading indicators. Again, if you're looking at a lagging indicator and you get to the end of your project and you measure something and you're like, well, we didn't hit that one like we thought we would, but it's too late to change it. But in the future, we'll figure that out. SEAM starts to look at leading indicators because leading indicators allow you time to make changes before you get to the end and realize that you missed your mark. So those are some specifics on how the certification is designed differently. And then we focus on 4 themes of social sustainability. We break those 4 themes down into 8 concepts. And then each concept has specific objectives that we're trying to achieve. And then the activities in the objectives basically lay out a roadmap for how do we actually achieve this objective. And so we look at social responsibility, which again is a lot of governance. We look at social impact, social accountability, protecting human rights across your supply chain and your project, and then social justice. And how do we start to weave social justice into our project? This is a better slide for how do we actually break it down. These are the 8 concepts, and then the bullet points are the 21 objectives. So I won't read these out to you, but this is a great slide for you to look at and be able to understand what are all the categories that we are addressing during this certification process.
So to explore an example, Rini, you might then have activities under each of these concepts, and the result from those activities might be different depending on your project. Is that true?
Can you say that? Can you say that again?
So if you were working on, let's say you're tackling the concept social equity and justice, number 5, on 2 different projects, and you pursued the activities and completed all activities for that concept, would your outcomes might be a little different
Oh,
depending
yeah,
on the
absolutely.
project?
Absolutely. If you look at even twins, and I know this for sure, my mom is an identical twin, right? Very different human beings. So no two human beings are going to be the same. No project is going to be the same. And so we look at a baseline for every project. And then that's one of the ways that we measure impact is where did you start? And at the end of the project, with all of the efforts that you made during the certification, where did you end up? And that's how we start to look at the impact. We also pull in context indicators. So you don't get points on context indicators, but it allows us to create an impact report at the end along with your scorecard so that you can see how you're doing not only within that project over time, but you can also look at how to compare projects in different areas. And it allows you more information to design strategies to be better the next time.
And we are looking at a couple certification levels. As Rainey shared earlier, SEAM AP is a necessary part of your project team in order to achieve silver, gold, or platinum. But anyone can strive for a bronze level certification.
Yeah. And what I would say here is that what's interesting about these certification levels, and I alluded to it before about not being based on points. It is. We do have a scorecard based on points. But the way it's designed is that if you are achieving gold, it means that the majority of the activities that you did pushed past preventing harm and started moving into creating some positive social impact. Even if it's short term, even if it's a small amount of people, you're starting to push past that societal threshold of good enough and move into positive impact. Platinum would be the majority of the activities that you completed were really creating some longer term positive impact or positive impact over larger populations of people. And then silver means most of the majority of your activities prevented or mitigated harm. So you're breaking even at silver. And then bronze says you're making progress towards that societal threshold of good enough, but maybe you haven't reached it quite yet, but you have done better. You look at your baseline versus where you ended on the project and you've made progress towards some of those social targets. So everyone always asks, how much does a SEAM certification cost? And there's a couple of ways that SEAM differs from LEAD or WELL. When you hire a SEAM AP, that consultant is essentially going to do, I would say, 95 to 97% of the work to get a client through this process. You don't have to go hire commissioning agents or materials testing or inspections. Those additional consultants that you have to hire for some of the other certifications, there is If a client does like a wage audit, if they're doing gender and diversity wage gaps or living wage gaps, we do require them to get a third party auditor because we don't want to put any legal liability on the CMAP. But outside of that, the CMAP handles all of the consulting. So while CMAPs are going to be the bulk of the cost of a SEAM certification, it's mainly the only consultant that they're having to hire. The SEAM fees are going to be a little bit less because, again, this is very process based versus building. While we do have a small dollar charge for square footage, I think it's 2 cents per square foot. Mainly, it's looking at what is the certification level you're trying to achieve. If you're going for platinum, you're probably doing way more of the activities on the scorecard and you're doing more of the social initiatives. So there's a lot more for the reviewers to review. So the review fees tend to go up with the higher certification levels. And then you've also got any ethical materials premiums, any architect or contractor premiums, for your hard cost and soft costs. And we don't have a bulk of data to be able to give you averages. So we looked at the same averages that environmental certifications charge for these materials premiums and soft cost premiums. There is a great calculator on our website. There's two. One that will simply look at SEAM fees based on some specifics of your project. And then the other one allows you to estimate what a full project cost would look like for your project. That one requires a bit more input, but it allows you to get a good sense of what are the SEAM fees, what are your SEAM project costs, and then once your project costs, then you plug that into the Rossi calculator to understand what is the return I'm getting on that cost to certify my project. So we did those calculators because that's the bulk of the questions that we get from developers and occupiers, right? They want to know, what's this going to cost me? And then what do I get out of having done this other than good feels and it's the right thing to do? This is obviously they're in it to run a business. So these calculators can help answer some of those questions and address some of those concerns.
Yeah, very well said. And now my favorite part, thinking about how you personally can become part of the SEAM community and be ready to support the growth of this exciting certification. So there's a couple different levels of membership, all of which offer really unique and exciting benefits. The first of which would be to become an individual member, at which point you'll have access to a resource library, recognition, and a directory, eligibility to become a CMAP, and a discount on any events, a standing membership. This is a really good option if you're looking to become a CMAP because this will cover one AP training and exam. You can then also use a logo, submit content to the network, receive additional recognition on the website, and receive a small organization membership. So this is really for folks with smaller organizations. Similarly, a ladder membership has a few more benefits and is designed for medium-sized organizations. And finally, an ARC membership is designed for large organizations and allows you to participate in working groups, contribute quarterly to an article on the website, and includes quite a few employee memberships, a couple APs, and an event sponsorship. So these are really clean, exciting packages that I think will speak to many of you on the call. I know we at Brightworks are really excited to train up our CMAPs and dive in and work with clients on this exciting certification. And so I encourage those of you who may also be in the consulting space to really consider this for next year, if not this year, as you continue to round out your own professional development. Do you have any questions on membership? Okay, stop. Cost of the exam. Lauren, thank you. We're going there next. So before we go there, I want to be sure to share that there's a couple ways that CM is willing to receive contributions in return for services. So first of all, for many of you on the call, you'll simply be able to pay through a direct financial contribution. That's always a really awesome way to go. It directly supports all of Rainey's time and other bits and pieces that the team at Seed might need in order to make this all happen and work for you. The next thing that you can consider doing is referring new members on the level you want to join in order to work up to the value of the membership that you're looking for. So that's another really exciting opportunity to consider if perhaps paying through a direct financial contribution isn't quite in the budget right now. And then finally, earn your membership. That's something that I'm excited to be doing here with you all today, which is participating and offering skills in needed areas. So as many of I used to do more community engagement work professionally. And so I'm excited to be here supporting with that. And there's opportunities and needs that SEAM may have in the future for additional support. So this is a really exciting way, I think, for the community to grow. And I would love to chat a little bit more about this as well. But I think in the effort of answering Lauren's question, we're going to go ahead and jump to the AP program, which again demonstrates knowledge and understanding of embedding social equity in the built environment. And so this is the AP program.
Essentially, we wanted to offer training so that, again, because we wanted to control the content, social is very hard. And our SEAM AP training has 11 total modules. We actually hired an instructional designer that has designed courses for NASA, Stanford, Harvard, all manner of companies, because we wanted to make sure that it was really good, but it was also global. Our instructional design team is actually in Ukraine, which is why our course isn't finished, because every time Russia bombs Ukraine, I lose about 2 weeks because they lose power. And so it's been a little longer. That training will help you prepare for a final exam. It does have a certification exam. We have hired a psychometrician to create that exam process so that it's credible. It is a 90-minute remote proctored exam, like you're probably familiar with being a well AP or some of the others. People are going through it pretty quickly. It is all video based. We didn't want to have people having to read a lot of material. You can read, especially some of the transcripts are flow along the side of some of the modules, but we wanted it to be more video based so that you can really go through it quickly. And then to be a SEAM AP, we do require that you are a SEAM member, and an individual membership is $69 per year. So that would be a cost. The training is a one-time cost of $129, and that helps us cover the costs of the instructional design and the LMS platform that we're offering the training. And then the certification exam is $389 one-time fee. I think we do allow one retake for free. And then after that, I think you have to pay the fee again. But that's once you're a CMAP, you don't have to take the exam again. It is good for 2 years. There is continuing education that you would have to keep up in order to keep your credential active for those 2 years.
Or if you get business membership, Rainey, it sounds like that's all included, depending
That's
on
right.
what membership you get.
Yeah, for sure. So if it's a corporate membership, there are individual members, like there are certain number of individual members that you get with a corporate membership, certain number of SEAM AP slots, which would include the training and the certification exam. We will, when you do the 129 one time, we are going to continue adding trainings to this platform. And you will have lifetime access to it once you do the one time. So we will continue to add new trainings, more in-depth information, documents, templates, all of that you'll have lifetime access to that.
Good deal. Any other questions on the AP program or the membership opportunity? Okay, we can come back, but we're going to go into one of my favorite parts of this conversation, which is thinking about some of the case studies and some of the project work that's actually being done. So this is a really exciting project that I think some of you on the call will know in Seattle, right outside, or I believe it might even be inside of, now that they've changed like the boundaries of this neighborhood with the removal of the viaduct, the Pioneer Square neighborhood in downtown Seattle.
Yeah. So before I jump into this, I do want to answer a question that came through. The training is now live. We are uploading modules as they are finished. I think we uploaded module 6 and 7 this week. So essentially, we would have modules 8 and 9 to be created. And then module 10 is a practice exam. So you can get into the training and start going through it right now. It is live. On the case study, so this is the absolute first pilot project that we signed up, and Greg Smith from Urban Visions, he's the developer. They really had this in their DNA. They are longtime Seattle natives. They really wanted to make sure that their project had positive community impact. It is in a place called Pioneer Square, which is in Seattle. And essentially, they are on track to get bronze. They did have some people leave right at the end that were helping with the SEAM certification. But essentially, what we looked at and what we ended up changing is all of Urban Vision's policies around procurement, the way they procure their materials, their suppliers, all their code of conduct. And what was cool about this project is every single one of our policies, all the governance, while we only mandate that it covers your project, you can apply it to an organization. And Urban Visions chose to. So all of the policies that they adopted for this project, they applied it to their organization, which is absolutely amazing. So I could answer a bunch of questions about this project, but ultimately we ended up doing community engagement, and we went to, there's a shelter right around the corner from here called Bread of Life. We ended up doing face-to-face interviews with the people that were staying at that shelter that were experiencing homelessness, and Urban Visions listened. What developer do you know of that's going to listen to and incorporate views from, again, those were stakeholders of the project. They were displaced when this project was created. They live in that neighborhood. And while most developers would completely write off the fact that someone that is experiencing homeless in their neighborhood, Urban Visions didn't. It was really quite amazing to watch. This one, I did take the logo off the building because, again, I signed an NDA. I'm not allowed to publicly say that we did this one, but we looked at 3 different projects for a global technology company. One was in Atlanta. This is their Atlantic Yards project. One was in Toronto, and the other one was in Washington, D.C. And they wanted to understand the efforts that they had put into it. They progressed. Atlantic Yards was the most they've ever tried to incorporate social into a project. And so we did an audit, and we looked at all of these 3 projects through the lens of what would you have scored had you been doing a SEAM certification? And then we looked at, with the efforts that you put in, if you had been guided by a SEAM AP, what would we think the estimated score be? And we essentially validated their hypothesis that they did more in Atlantic Yards. And so the audits proved that. And it gave them an action and a roadmap for certifying these projects on an operations and maintenance SEAM certification going forward. And then this is Interface's headquarters. We did a feasibility study for their headquarters and they wanted to understand the gap between where they were now And they're obviously Interface is an incredibly sustainable company, but they hadn't done as much and didn't understand the social side of the landscape. And so they wanted to understand what their gap was. And after we did this feasibility study, we decided that we wanted to do the SEAM certification on one of their manufacturing locations in Georgia versus this headquarters, because we felt like they would get more bang for the buck because they're a manufacturer, and we could really help guide and put some processes in place around their supply chain, which I think is going to be pretty great. They're in the process of kicking off that project. I think it should start either Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year, because it has some construction in it and the construction's been delayed.
That's really interesting, Brady, because this case study is different from the other two in that it's a feasibility study that was done. Is that something that the SEAM certification can help you do?
Yeah, if you're a CMAP, typically you always do a feasibility on the front end, right? And so we basically said, look, let's do a feasibility study separate before you do your SEAM certification to understand what are the efforts going to be to do this, and is this the right location to do? And so essentially we broke apart the feasibility and the project management of the certification into two separate pieces, which worked out great in this case.
Awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. We didn't have as many questions as I was anticipating, but we've made good progress. We've got about 10 or so minutes left in our hour together. I want to be sure to open the floor for any other questions, comments, thoughts, curiosities about this exciting new certification. And as I shared with you earlier, there are a couple things that we were puzzling out in terms of how we wanted this to work right before and this presentation in order to create this. So I want to be sure to allow you the opportunity to collaborate with us and offer any feedback as well.
Absolutely. We will, once this converts, we can send it out to everyone that had the Eventbrite, and feel free to share it with as many people as you want.
Thanks, you guys. This is really exciting to see this happening. I know a lot of our clients have a desire to make a change and to do something different. So I feel like this is a really good opportunity to help the clients reach out and help our communities. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Everyone have a great weekend. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. So any final thoughts, Sunny?
I don't think so. Just really excited to hopefully see you all sign up to be members and join the AP program. I think this is likely to be the first many calls and collaboration opportunities for this exciting crew. So thank you for joining today.
Is there any way to get any more information on these case studies and some of the things that you actually implemented for helping me understand a little bit better what things were actually done within the community?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We haven't written up like a full case study on any of these outside of just the slide. I probably should do that, but I'm happy to speak directly to you. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to walk you through it and directly answer any specific questions that you have.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
And were all of these case studies just for offices or headquarters? Is it all office assets? That asset class?
They were all office. We do have pilot projects starting now, one that is a school, one that's a multifamily. Well, it's an office conversion to multifamily, but multifamily construction. We do a lot of office operations and maintenance because it's an easy entry into SEAM certification. But SEAM applies to every kind of project that you can imagine. So anything that you can construct or manage or operate or occupy, SEAM certification addresses it.
And why do you say office is the easiest to enter?
Not necessarily office is easy to enter. The operations and maintenance is a bit easier to enter because you're not, when you have a ground up construction or a large construction project, it just obviously takes a lot longer. So if you're looking at an existing asset, an operations and maintenance can go faster.
Sure.
and there's less chance that you would do anything in the process that would delay something you've got going on, right?
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Talk soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.